Article 35, and we'll move on to Article 36, which is opposing the addition of fluoride in the town water. Is there a presenter here this evening for that citizen's petition?
Yep, that's me, Brian.
Okay. All right. So again, Brian, if you can please keep it to somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes max. Thank you.
Sure, I will. Thank you. I'm going to share a PowerPoint presentation. Can you just confirm you can see that?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, great. All right, so thanks for letting me present. So the big issue that I want to present is the new information, because there's probably a lot of you asking, hey, this has already come up 2 times at least, and a third time didn't actually make it to the floor of town meeting. But you'd say, well, what's changed? Why am I bringing this forward again? A lot's changed, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. So since 2016, when I last presented, there's been a lot of change, and basically it's fluoride's linked to reduced IQ in children. So here's the history. I'm not going to. I do have more text in here that I'm going to read just so you can have it afterwards. But the water fluoridation history in Shrewsbury, it really started in 1952, and then I brought some things since 2015. But what's interesting is that even in 1952, when they were debating this, thanks to Dan Morgado for finding that, the minutes of that, they referenced fluoride as harmful. You know, there were people in town meeting, Mrs. Dudley was one of them, that had referenced it as harmful. And not only that, that just shows you that even since 2015, when I first got onto this topic and sent a letter to the Board of Health to suspend fluoridation, I had referenced the harmfulness, which is fluoride as a neurotoxin and a link to lowered IQ. And as you can see in all the highlighted text, for every petition or request that we've done to the town, I've highlighted the neurotoxin and link to lower IQ. So this isn't new. This has been 6 years. Most recently in 2019, I brought it back to the town, the Board of Selectmen and Board of Health, to notify pregnant women about the latest study published in the Journal of American Medical Association Pediatrics on fluoride's link to reduced IQ in children. That request was denied. And so I just wanted to kind of show you that the theme is there, and I'm going to kind of show you why that's important. So why it's important is since 2016, that's when actually there was a petition to the EPA, and it's under the Toxic Substances Control Act, or TSCA. And what the law does is it authorized EPA to prohibit the particular use of a chemical that presents an unreasonable risk to the general public or susceptible subpopulations. And the particular use thing would be, of course, apply to fluoride, and not just, you know, getting rid of fluoride altogether. You're saying a particular use, which would be fluoridation. Now, when the EPA denied that petition, that was done in 2016, it actually allows process-wise to go to trial. So they were actually able to sue the EPA for denying their petition to exercise the EPA's authority to prohibit the purposeful addition of fluoridation on the grounds of all the new research that showed that fluoride was neurotoxic at the doses within the range now in fluoridated communities. So this case landed in federal court after EPA denied the petition. The EPA has tried to get it dismissed, but that was not dismissed, and so we actually they were actually able to go to trial. Now, why is that important? Well, there was actually a 2-week trial held via Zoom. But it's not only the trial, but it's also the depositions that occurred in this trial. So that's why a lot of things don't go to trial, because not that they don't think they're going to win, but they don't want things getting uncovered, right? They don't want depositions. They don't want discovery, because that's where you get all this information that's not out normally in the public's eye. So that's what this trial actually allowed us to do. So what was interesting about this 2-week trial is you'd think, fluoride, safe and effective, no problem. Well, what happened is that that wasn't the case, and actually, they found the court, which actually had full power to rule on this based on the TSCA law, that the court could have ruled either way and just said nope, fluoride's good, or yep, fluoride's bad. But instead, what they did is they said, you know what, we're going to put an abeyance order, and there was reasons for this that I'm going to get into. And this trial is still going on. It's held in abeyance, and they have status updates. I just had one today And really what they're doing is that there's been so much scientific evidence that's come forward since 2016 that they wanted the EPA to re-look at the science because it came up during the trial. And just most notably right now, there's actually a national toxicology program review of fluoride exposure that's going on, being peer reviewed by the National Academy of Sciences, and they're waiting for that final product. The court is. So, if you look at my petition, I have two whereas kind of clauses. It's whereas the CDC admits to certain things, and the EPA admits to certain things. So, a lot of people, rely and trust on what the CDC has to say, what the EPA has to say. So I wanted to bring that forward as the reasons, because when you see, I think you'll see why there's some concern here. So the first one, admission, was that this, and I'll actually show you this, that these are excerpts from the depositions, but they actually were able to depose the director of oral health at the CDC. So he is representing the CDC as a whole in this court case. So the first thing we said is there's no benefit from prenatal exposure to fluoridated water, right? We hear it's safe and effective, and it has to be safe and effective for everybody if you put it in the water, right? Nobody said there's a harm to any population or subpopulation or vulnerable subpopulation. So I'm just going to read this. This is directly from the deposition. So question, so the CDC's conclusion in 2001 is that they had good evidence, high quality evidence to show that fluoride supplements do not provide a benefit for children when given during pregnancy, correct? Answer, yeah, when given to pregnant women. So they've known since 2001 that there is no benefit to the child when given to pregnant women. And he also, during that deposition I have in the upper right, he also is quoted as saying, we have not found evidence that shows benefit to the child if community water fluoridation or some other form of fluoride is ingested by the mother. So that's prenatal. What about infants? So the question was asked.
Judy, point of order.
Mark,
Sorry,
what's your
I heard
point of order?
How much longer is this going to go on? Don't we have a time frame that we have
Yeah,
to?
10 minutes. I asked for a maximum of 10 minutes.
Thank you.
So what about infants? Question, is the CDC aware of any evidence demonstrating benefits from consumption of fluoridated drinking water during the first 6 months of life? Answer, we are not aware of any evidence. So when we say the CDC's science, they have none to prove that it's effective for either fetuses or infants. The other part of my petition is about they don't have the data on the upper tolerable upper level of fluoride, right? For children, they don't have the actual safe dose. So question, so CDC does not have any data on the tolerable upper fluoride intake for neurotoxic effects on children. Answer, right. So they have zero data, zero studies, zero science on what the upper tolerable intake is. So that means they do not have any science to say what's safe. And then, so then there's also admissions by the EPA. And I'm going to go through each one of those. So you might say, well, pregnant women are drinking fluoride, the placenta's there, they're protected. But they have these undisputed facts. One of them was by the EPA. Fluoride passes through the placenta and gets into the fetal brain. Now, those studies I was talking about, I'm going to do a little summary here. This is Judge Chen who's presiding over it. I want to read what he said. So much has changed since the petition was filed. 2 significant series of studies, respective cohort studies, which everyone agrees is the best methodology. Everybody agrees that these were rigorous studies, and everybody agrees that these studies would be part of the best available scientific evidence. When he says everybody, he's including the EPA. The EPA also, also appears to have applied a standard of causation, which is way over. You don't even have to do causation for lead, which for my read of TSCR is not accurate. It's not a proper allocation. It's not the proper standard. It's unreasonable risk, not causation. He also said, because there is serious evidence here, there is no doubt that these 2 studies from Canada or Mexico raise serious questions. And this is just more data for you can look at. This is actually the court order in abeyance, and he actually has all of the EPA reference disclosure depositions and testimonies that actually say that the studies that I'm talking about, Bahash, Green, and Till, are the most rigorous. They are the best studies, highest quality studies, most reliable studies to date on the subject. So these aren't cherry-picked studies that we're talking about. If anybody says we're cherry-picking, this is the EPA itself saying these are the best studies. Oh, what's going on here? Okay, oops. So these are the 4 studies. And what happened was the first study came out in 2017. It was in Urato fluoride exposure linked to lower IQ in kids. These are NIH funded, by the way. So a lot of the criticisms in the past were these are not US government funded studies, but they are. All 4 of these are government funded by the NIH. Which of these are the ones the EPA say are the best? So when the green study came out, that's when I came back to the town and said, uh-oh, because it was said before, well, we don't have any peer-reviewed studies that repeat any harm. Well, here's the green study repeated the study in 2017, showing low fluoride exposure can reduce IQ. And since then, we've had another one. So there's four studies. I'm a little trouble with my presentation. Please hold. And then this is the chief scientist on fluoride at EPA. So I was saying that if you think, well, no, EPA says there's a certain limit, we don't need to look at it. Here's the chief scientist question. And would you agree that this study further supports the need for reassessment of current safety standard of fluoride in the United States? Answer, yes, it's one of several. And she's talking about those 4 NIH-funded studies. Oops. So I'm almost done. What's very important is that I told you how the court's waiting for the NTP monograph to be finally finished being peer reviewed. Well, the actual director of the NTP, and she was also the director of National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, both under the NIH. She was the director for 10 years. She has since retired in 2019, and she wrote an op-ed, which was called, It's Time to Protect Kids Developing Brains from Fluoride. Mounting evidence suggests fluoride may be hampering brain development and reducing kids' IQ. The U.S. needs to rethink the exposure for pregnant women and children. Some of the authors of those studies are included here, Bruce Lanphier and Christine Till. Bruce Lanphier is actually somebody that the EPA relied on for the air lead standard. So he's respected as well and used by the EPA. And that's Linda Birnbaum. Now the conclusion in the draft form is
excuse me, Brian, are you about ready to wrap up? Because
yeah.
I have you at your time.
Yeah, if I can get another minute, that would be helpful. I'm almost
if you could please wrap it up. We do have a long evening ahead of us. Okay.
So the conclusion that they made in the NTP, though, this is just draft. The conclusion is NTP concludes that fluoride is presumed to be a cognitive neurodevelopment hazard to humans. And then just a quote from the JAMA Pediatrics, which was the study from 2019. They actually had the JAMA Pediatrics editor-in-chief surprised, and you can read some of this later, saying, I've always heard from my traditional teaching here that fluoride is completely safe, and all the people trying to take it out of the water are nuts. It's the best thing that's ever happened for children's dental health, and we just need to push back and get it into every water system. So when I first saw the study, my inclination was, what the hell? So, this is where we got to take a look at this stuff. Even, you have the editor-in-chief of the premier pediatrics journal saying this. You've got the EPA and CDC information I gave you above. So I think it's time that we oppose and get the fluoride out of the water. Thank you.
Any questions or comments from the Finance Committee? Mr. Adler, I see your hands up.
Thank you, Judy, and thank you, Brian, for your presentation. I'm just looking at the language of your petition, and it doesn't have all the other stuff, all the statements by JAMA Pediatrics, the editor-in-chief. It's just these 2 statements from CDC and EPA, both of which are basically saying we don't have information that it's good. And I'll tell you that doesn't mean that it's bad. When you say the data is not cherry-picked. That doesn't mean it's not cherry-picked. It means you just say it's not cherry-picked. You cherry-picked your data. You cherry-picked a lot of your data. I'd love to spend some time cherry-picking some data too, but that's not what the Shrewsbury Town Meeting should be doing. The Board of Health is very qualified to do this, and I can tell you the Shrewsbury Town Meeting is not qualified to make decisions based on an incomplete federal civil lawsuit that's going on. Information that is admitted in trial during the discovery phase is insufficient for us to be making decisions. Now, you've been here so many times, and I'm glad that you come back when you've got more information. But every time you come back, and it's been a lot of times, as you admitted earlier in the evening, every time you do this, it gets harder and harder for us to listen to this data and accept it because it becomes crying wolf. And that doesn't mean that there's not a wolf. It's just harder and harder for us to follow it that way. And last fall, for Pete's sake, after Trump lost the election, he just kept claiming day in and day out, lawsuit after lawsuit. Even after every single court threw his case out of office, they came back and said, well, that one was biased. We're going to do it again and again. And they did it for 4 months, suing every single day, even though the case kept getting thrown out. And I kind of feel like we're doing that same thing now. I feel like we're talking to a brick wall, that every time the town meeting overwhelmingly votes no against this, you're going to come back the next year with some more cherry-picked data and go, aha, but this time I mean it. And maybe you do, but you've lost credibility, and it's getting frustrating for us. Thank you.
Can I ask the chair, can I just respond for 30 seconds?
30 seconds, please.
Yeah, one thing, I did bring it back to the Board of Selectmen and Water Commissioners, and they directed me to go to the Board of Health. So when I went to the Board of Health, an interesting thing was, as I had said to them, I said, well, we have these studies coming up that show that there's a link to harm, lower IQ, if pregnant women drink fluoridated water. Can you provide me the studies to prove it's safe? Will you ask the Mass Department of Public Health and Worcester Department of Public Health to provide those studies? They got to be sitting right there. It should be easy. And they voted to deny my request for transparency to actually get the safety studies. So now we have these 4 studies, but we have zero, either interest or zero studies, right, that prove it's safe. So I just want to say I have tried before coming to town meeting. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Dennis O'Connell has his hand up.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into the politics of this, but as a finance committee member, what do you expect the cost of the town to be if this were to go through?
So actually, we're going to
severe budget crisis, and I grew up with fluoride. Everyone else grew up on fluoride, so I just, what are you expecting this to be?
So that's a great question. Thank you for asking it, because right, we used to spend more money on fluoride. So this will actually save the town money. So if we spend probably around, I'll say under 10,000 now. In the past, we've spent somewhere around 20,000 probably a year on fluoride. So and even before, when we were using hydrofluorosilicic acid, which is a strong acid, the water department did confirm that they had to use more. I forget if it was whatever it was to counteract the acid, so they had to spend more. So there was more money spent to counteract the lowering of pH of the water. But we are spending less because we are getting the fluoride from China now. We're getting sodium fluoride since we got the water treatment plant. We get the fluoride from the phosphate fertilizer industry in China. That we have a plant where I got that confirmed that the fluoride is coming from. And so it's a cheaper fluoride, but it would save us money. So if you enact this, we won't have to budget the 10,000, 20,000 for fluoride anymore.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments from the Finance Committee? Okay, seeing none, any questions or comments from the Board of Selectmen that may be on? Please raise the hand. Okay, I'm going to open it up for public comment. If anybody in the public would like to comment, please use the raise the hand feature. Seeing none, thank you, Brian. I appreciate you coming before the Finance Committee.
Great, thanks, everybody.
At this point now, okay, that takes us to Article 36, opposing the addition of fluoride in the water.
Judy,
Mr. Adler,
I recommend, I move that we recommend defeat of Article 36.
Second.
all right, so we have a motion, a move, it's been moved and seconded to recommend defeat of Article 36. So we're going to go down through and take a roll call vote for all of those that recommend defeat of Article 36. Mr. Adler,
Aye.
Vikram Chhabra,
Aye.
Dennis O'Connell,
Aye.
Aaron Howard,
Aye.
Hannah Kane,
Aye.
Carlos Garcia,
Aye.
Mark Murray,
Aye.
Judy Vetter, aye. So we've recommended defeat of Article 36 by a vote of 8-0. Okay.